of military equipment belonging to these mercenaries. Secondly, fighters from our people, they're led by Saddam's Fidayins. They've managed to uncover a tactic used by these mercenaries. On the road from Al-Bidaniya to Al-Nasiriyah, if I ask a number of you representing a number of TV stations, if I ask you to go to Al-Nasiriyah using the motorway from Baghdad to the south via Diwaniyah towards Nasiriyah, maybe you'll be able to reach Nasiriyah with no problem, and you can get into Nasiriyah with no problem. However, the mercenaries couldn't get into Nasiriyah. On your return, you'll find a checkpoint. You'll find a checkpoint manned by these lackeys between Al-Nasiriyah and Al-Diwaniyah, for example.
Now they say they have that consolidated, so they're on the west and the southeast of the city, and they also, during that operation, took about 200 prisoners of war. In addition to trying to win militarily the situation around Basra, they're also trying to win the people over, and to that end, they're trying to deliver humanitarian aid. It's still impossible, really, in significant quantities to get it into Basra, so they're settling for as much as they can in as many towns and villages as they can that are already secured to the south of the Basra region. We're going to get the latest from...
Pick up on the thoughts with respect to the air campaign, because it is so decisive at this particular point with respect to those divisions south of Baghdad. Turn to the map 1 second and just try to put this in context. Once again, Jim, let me stress those 4 divisions, and perhaps even more as they're being reinforced south of Baghdad, but we know 4 already: Hammurabi, Medina, Al-Nida in the Baghdad divisions. Those 4 Republican Guard divisions are the objects now of this important move by the coalition. We heard the coalition describe the air campaign. Over 60% of the strikes on the heaviest day of the war to this point directed against those 4 divisions. And perhaps under the cover of that and helped by the degradation of those divisions, we see now the 3rd Division moving well beyond Najaf to Karbala and thence to the east, to engage the lead elements of the Medina Division that are acting, in essence, Jim, as a screen, as a combat outpost, to begin to shape their own battlefield. And now the 3rd Division has, in essence, said, we've re-equipped, we've reset, and we're now going to move forward and see the extent of this degradation. Coalition has said it could be as high as 50%, but it's the 3rd Division's task to ascertain precisely how much degradation there has been there, and what we'll find now in these coming hours undoubtedly will be the first direct fire engagements between the brigades of the Medina and of the 3rd Division. Jim?
My friend and I, we attacked a tank and we destroyed the tank. Then we took over the tank and we burned the tank. Then they opened fire on us, and I killed one of them, the British infantry. They attacked us, and I killed one of them with this weapon, and he fell in the water.
The Royal Marines were in contact with their enemy, a firefight of one sort or another, for 14 hours, overnight and into this morning. For 600 men of 40 Commando, this was their biggest battle of the war. Their targets were Iraqi positions in and around the Basra suburb of Abu Al-Khasib. The British codenamed this Operation James after James Bond, licensed to kill tanks perhaps, and the Iraqi T-55s were no match for the armour with the Royal Marines. Whatever was captured intact was put out of action.
Yes, we captured 2 officers and 5 other ranks, including a lieutenant colonel and a major. They're being processed now.
A military success is one thing, a political success is another. This is supposed to be an army of liberation winning over the Iraqis.
I think that we're winning over the local population, and I think that is at the root of it. We've been broadly welcomed by the majority of the population.
The British say that 30 Iraqis were killed in the operation and 14 of their own commandos were injured. This is just a part of the larger picture. So far, the Iraqi Air Force has not been flying, and the Americans showed pictures from a western airfield which explained why not.
It's as simple as if they fly, they die. It's as simple as that. If they come up, we'll destroy them, and as you see, if we find them, we'll destroy them.
Further south, the battle has continued for Nasiriyah. Helicopter gunships in the air have been joined by 5,000 American reinforcements on the ground.
Eternal Father, grant we pray.
A battlefield service for Marine Corps Corporal Jesus Juarez del Solar, the first of his unit to die. He was represented by his boots, his rifle and his helmet.
On Iraqi soil, we got to let his honor live on. We got to hold our heads up high, and we got to continue to march, continue to fight.
Martin Bell, 5 News.
Arrive at the command post. This morning's mission to destroy an Iraqi position and kill the troops dug in there.
Fire! Load! Fire!
Day after day after day now, these guns have targeted Iraqi positions around Basra, hitting tanks, artillery, mortars, and inevitably killing many Iraqi soldiers and paramilitaries. And yet, the city still appears to be under the control of supporters of Saddam's regime. The armchair analysts back in Britain reckon the invasion has stalled. So does it feel like that to the gunners on the ground?
Well, I'm certainly not the only one who's getting annoyed with just sitting still now. But if the politicians want to come out and fight it for us, then let them crack on. Because they're saying it's not going fast enough. Well, it's not our fault. So, I mean, what more can you add on that?
Majority of squaddies will tell you they spend most of their lives hanging around for something or other. And whether that's waiting for, you know, an unconditional surrender by the Iraqi regime, or whether we just go into Basra and take it by storm. Not our call, but we just sit and wait.
I currently believe in the policy that we shouldn't particularly go into Basra at an early stage. We should wait for things to develop and push the humanitarian aid effort and then see what happens.
In the area west of Basra, where the desert rats have been a feature for almost a fortnight, the reconnaissance teams report local people are now noticeably more welcoming. But according to military sources, the intelligence coming out of Basra itself strongly suggests the situation there is unlikely to alter until Saddam is certain to fall. Catherine Jones, Southern Iraq, 5 News.
The armour breaks the night calm. It's just before midnight, and Challenger 2 tanks take up position for a push towards Iraq's second city of Basra. A few minutes later, flares illuminate the night sky, pinpointing for British mortars Iraqi positions. Then the barrage begins. The military call them pre-fires, the softening up of the enemy before the men on foot, British Marines, go in. We go in as well. The pre-fires were the signal for us to move, driving at speed into the unknown, with elite troops from 3 Commando Brigade. It's as nerve-wracking for us as it is for the 3 Marines we're traveling with, in this heavily armed Land Rover, part of a 24-vehicle attack convoy. The mission is to secure a key bridge for coalition forces leading to Basra. A rocket-propelled grenade just misses us. We hang on in the back for dear life. easy targets for Iraqi fire.
The firefight's been underway now for about 15 minutes. It's unclear exactly how many Iraqi troops are up ahead of us. The intelligence all day hasn't been clear.
Dawn. And with the bridge secure after an intense firefight, more British mortars target Iraqi positions. While we were at the bridge, this is what the mortars and Challenger tanks were leaving in their wake. A wasteland of Iraqi armor. And through the haze of smoke from burning metal walks Iraqi prisoners of war, including officers.
This truly is a war zone. The landscape is littered with the remains of burnt-out Iraqi tanks and bunker positions. And behind me, prisoners of war are being taken into custody. The road to Basra is opening up.
We're now entering the town of Abu Al-Khasib, a suburb of Basra. Some of Saddam Hussein's most trusted men have their holiday homes here.
What I've got in there, fella? Oh, go on, do you want to explain?
Soon an arms cache is found. And British troops decide to blow it up. Onlookers watch us. It's hard to know if they think of the Marines or of us traveling with them as liberators or illegal occupiers. These children have known no other leader but Saddam Hussein. His forces on the road to Basra have been dealt a severe blow. The gates of the city are within sight for the coalition army, but only just. Clive Myrie, BBC News in Abu Al-Khasib, southern Iraq.
Like shooting fish in a barrel. The Iraqis' anti-aircraft defences have long since been destroyed. The Iraqi soldiers are running for their lives. Their command post is neatly obliterated. This kind of pounding is becoming nearly unbearable for the Iraqis. They're just ordinary recruits. They could die if they stay, or be shot if they try to desert. Increasingly, though, they're taking the risk of escaping. This is the moment of freedom and safety for 2 Iraqi soldiers. They've just arrived at the Kurdish lines. They were happy to talk to our translator. The man on the left escaped this morning. The other had been walking since Saturday. They hadn't eaten for days. Neither knew what was going on in the war. All they did know was that execution squads killed deserters. The Kurdish military intelligence officers who looked after them told us that today alone around 40 deserters had come across. They were taking them to a camp nearby. The rest of the deserters were brought out, hooded and shielded by local people to prevent their being identified, since their families in Iraq could be punished. The only faces you can see here are those of Kurdish people. Iraqis have come to expect brutality. One deserter asked us nervously if they'd be executed at their prisoner of war camp.
First light gave many Iraqis the chance they wanted to give up. Among them 2 senior army officers. The Marines say these were the first of 200 Iraqis taken prisoner. By mid-morning, their target, Abu Al-Khasib, had been taken too. The Iraqis had positioned tanks throughout the village, but they dug them in. So when the Marines attacked, they couldn't move. They were picked off one by one. The village air thick with the heavy smoke of defeat, the tank crews dead. Then, from the date palms around the village, more men emerged. They wore no uniform. They were snipers, experts in the ambush and the trap. But they'd been trapped, and their war is over.
The plan was to cross the line of departure here and to punch forward with a troop of tanks. That has been successful. They've destroyed a number of bridge equipment pieces, a number of tanks, and APCs. They've pushed all the way forward on this axis, which is Scarlet, and have taken up a strong defensive position on this junction.
Many Iraqis in the south want to see Saddam Hussein defeated, but they're not greeting the foreign attackers with roses, just bewildered stares. One aim of this attack is to squeeze Iraq's second city, Basra, even more, in the hope that it explodes from the inside in a popular uprising. But there's no sign of that so far. So these Marines are now preparing to take the city the hard way. Bill Neely, ITV News, with the Royal Marines in southern Iraq.
4 rounds complete.
This is the British front line. Northwest of Basra, UK guns take on Iraqi forces. Incoming shells force the troops into trenches, but most of the firing is in the other direction. According to the army, in the past day, these troops have destroyed 25 tanks, 12 gun positions, armoured cars and Iraqi infantry.
We identified a number of Iraqi formations out in the area to the north of us, and we've been hitting those with artillery and air and causing quite a lot of damage up there.
And today we saw these bigger guns, 155mm with a 25-kilometre range, being brought in to strengthen British positions. The military plan is to keep 3 Iraqi army divisions to the north out of the region. This area might not look like much with its burning oil plants and indeed its relics of war, but it's strategically important for 2 reasons. First of all, because it cuts off the command and control routes from Baghdad to Basra. And secondly, as this pollution suggests, it's an area rich in oil. And it's oil that coalition forces want to use to pay for this country to be rebuilt once the war is over. But these British soldiers know that could take a while, and so they make the most of their time off. Philip Ray-Smith, ITV News, southern Iraq.
For the first time in this sector, a lull in the fighting sufficient to get some food and medicine to the people of Nasiriyah. Hundreds queued through the day to get rice, flour, baby milk, even some dates, often the first supplies since the fighting started. More important, the first medical care in many days, a rudimentary tent allowing 2 Marine doctors to do what little they could.
Okay, good. It's going to be a big effort ultimately, and we got to start somewhere and just continue to work out. Ultimately, we want to make sure the local Iraqis are feeding themselves and taking care of themselves.
It is the first step down what may be a very long road to win hearts and minds. But this small patch of relative calm should not deceive one into thinking that somehow the fighting is over. On the contrary, just 20 miles north of here, there has been a tremendous battle today for the town of Shatra, a town where coalition forces believe that one of Saddam's most notorious henchmen may be hiding out. Ali Hassan al-Majid, known as Chemical Ali because he organised the gassing of the Kurds in Halabja, is Saddam's cousin and commands this southern front. For US forces, he is very near the top of their target list. Yesterday in Nasiriyah, it was Cobra helicopter gunships that pounded Iraqi forces. In Shatra today, the same weaponry backed up Marines on the ground as they pushed into the town.
Phone exchange in the capital, the 7th to be destroyed, though the phone system had collapsed long before this one was hit. And this attack on the so-called information ministry, knocking state television temporarily off air, another symbol of Saddam's power, forced to quake. Regime today promoting a message of pan-Arab jihad, claiming these fighters from Syria, Algeria and Egypt have volunteered to join them. With President Mubarak today claiming this conflict will create 100 more bin Ladens, Iraq's foreign minister was only too keen to develop that theme.
There are currently more volunteers arriving in Iraq from all the Arab countries. The number of these volunteers has risen from around 4,000, which was the count 3 days ago, to over 5,000 now.
After fierce Iraqi attacks on supply lines, the 101st Airborne Division today delivered food, water and mail from home by air. Ground troops, now 50 miles from Baghdad, are preparing to take on 3 Republican Guard divisions, though they may decide to wait for reinforcements, given the scale of resistance so far. More evidence of that in central Iraq, where a raid on the Ba'ath Party office at Al-Kafil was met with an Iraqi counterattack. Dead bodies and destruction across a wide area. American forces on guard against another suicide attack, after one on Saturday killed at least 4 soldiers. Any new coalition deployments far more likely now to see combat, on top of the task of eventually stabilizing a conquered country. And when the Americans make an area safe, like here outside Najaf, Iraqi fighters have melted away, sometimes leaving booby traps behind them.
On the other side of the river?
Too few Arabic interpreters, making it even harder to spread a message of peace. From the air, it can look so easy. A tank outside Nasiriyah destroyed. But on the ground, hundreds are queuing for rice and baby food during a lull in the fighting, an early attempt to win hearts and minds.
This morning, under armoured British Army escort, apparently the only safe way to enter the town just south of Basra. The Defence Secretary says British forces control the vast bulk of southern Iraq. He obviously hasn't been here recently. The truth is, British forces may dominate most of the area geographically, but the Iraqis still dominate most of their towns.
There is no set enemy in military uniform like ourselves out there. The enemy is dressed in civilians, mixed in with the civilians, and to our eyes is part of the normal population. I mean, it's only until they start firing at us that we can react to it.
The commander of the British Army here told his senior officers what to expect in the weeks leading up to the war. On February the 3rd, in this directive, he wrote, "There'll be 5 key objectives for the British in this war: the Iraqi army, the irregular militias, the Rumaila oil field, the port of Qasr, and Basra." After 12 days of war, 2 of the 5 objectives have been achieved: the seizure of Qasr and the oil field. Yet nowhere in the document is there any indication that every urban area in southern Iraq would strongly resist the invasion. Come to Az Zubayr, for instance, and you can see how things have changed. This town didn't even feature on the plans issued by the General Officer Commanding, General Brims, before the invasion began. In fact, they've been fighting here now and resisting the invaders for 12 days. In his briefing document, the General admits there was virtually no intelligence about Iraqi forces. We do not know the condition nor intent of these critical elements. British commandos have been finding out, though, about them, fighting their way through Abu Al-Khasib, the back door to Basra. Seizing and destroying arms dumps, collecting POWs, 3,250 or so now being held in the British sector.
Yes, we've captured 2 officers and 5 other ranks, including a lieutenant colonel and a major. They're being processed now.
So it's been a successful morning so far?
So far, but there's still a lot to do, yeah.
Foot patrols and Challenger tanks moving ever nearer Basra, and all the time the Iraqi people looking on, somewhat bemused. 2 men, though, were definitely pleased to see the invaders, Kenyan drivers of an aid convoy kidnapped by Iraqi militias 10 days ago.
They beat us and take everything we have, money, everything. We don't have anything.
2 days ago their captors fled, and this morning locals in Az Zubayr tipped off soldiers of the Black Watch who went round and picked them up.
They were very happy to see the boys. I think they've obviously been under a few stressful days. So, as you can imagine, seeing the jocks scream in there, you know, they were happy.
The children still stand beneath the mural of Saddam, which the British haven't got their hands on, and chant their leader's name here. They have just 4 British Army bases at the edge of this town of 150,000 people. Often the business of doling out clean water, winning hearts and minds, looks more like riot control.
Located near the H-2 airfield in western Iraq. The second video is also of an A-10 attack on 2 vehicles on a road north of Al-Asa. The aircraft used its 30mm Gatling gun in this attack. The third video is of an FNA-18 using rockets to strike an artillery emplacement south of Al-Amara.
Mark out the front line, a comfortable distance from paramilitaries who've taken cover amongst civilians in the city centre. This squadron's job, to pick off abandoned artillery. But in reality, 9 days after the desert rats arrived on the outskirts of Basra, the big gun battles are over and the troops anxious to move on.
I wouldn't exactly say it's extremely scary, although so you're flinching then when the explosions are going off. The lads are getting quite used to it as it is. I think they're just quite excited and quite willing to go forward and clear this mess up as soon as possible.
The regular Iraqi army were defeated days ago. The shells of their tanks all that remain. While these frontline troops are still firing and being fired upon, some mortar rounds landed just near here last night. There's no doubt that critical damage has been inflicted upon the enemy. And many are beginning to ask why this waiting game is going on so long.
What people have to realise is that we wait for the conditions to be absolutely right before we go into Basra to alleviate the problems in that area.
It's a tedious pause for men far from home and anxious to press on. Soldiers left fighting the flies when they'd rather be finishing a war. Juliet Bremner, ITV News, near Basra.
British troops, Az Zubayr, population 250,000. The fighting here has been fierce, but the Royal Tank Regiment commander who captured this place gets a warm welcome from many of its people.
There's no denying there was some very brutal street fighting going on in this town, and our equipment was fantastic, and our men are now battle hardened, and we have won this battle. It's a good news story, and militarily highly successful.
British troops are still hunting down Iraqi paramilitaries here, but most of Saddam's fighters are dead or have fled, and their leader's face has been wiped off the walls.
So British troops are firmly in control of Az Zubayr. The battle for this town was ferocious, and there are still isolated pockets of resistance. But as you can see, the rule of Saddam Hussein here is well and truly over.
His arm is all that's left of a presidential statue pulled down by a Challenger tank today. And the Ba'ath Party headquarters in Az Zubayr has also been destroyed. People pick their way through documents, maybe even secret files that have been left behind. There are claims this could have been the town's torture chamber, and here a hall of gas masks. Do they mean Saddam may have been planning to use